Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure humulite. Trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest humulite reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth humulite. Learn more from mine to market by visiting blackearth.com.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun, Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. We have got a great show for you here today for everybody listening on Rural Radio. Also, of course, big shout out to everybody out there listening to the RealAg Radio podcast as well. And for those of you listening to the RealAg Radio podcast, you're, of course, going to get a bonus segment today with our fabulous panel. And that panel is made up of, hey, we got two omissions today. Lindsay and Kelvin are both on, they're vacaying today. Lindsay's headed to Steve Terpstra's wedding, who we heard from Steve yesterday. And I think Kelvin's out at the lake with the fam. So great stuff. So stepping up today is Andrew Campbell of Fresh Air Media, based out of Strathroy, Ontario. Tyler McCann is a frequent guest on this program, managing director at CAPI. And then Marvin Slingerland, who is the senior VP of agriculture at MNP. We're going to discuss a whole lot of issues. Canada-U.S. trade talks. We've got the U.S. Japan trade deal. We've got this letter, this Grow Canada letter that 30 different organizations across the agricultural sector in Canada signed, trying to encourage the government to make agriculture a priority. Okay, we'll see what the panel thinks about that. As well as earlier this week, we had Minister Heath MacDonald on the program. We'll get the panel's reaction to some of the things that he said as well. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Or, find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. You can subscribe to our e-newsletters at realagriculture.com/subscribe. And just a lot of ways to get a hold of us. Indeed. Woo boy, I am excited because Canada is the home of your first place Toronto Blue Jays. That's right. Wow, baby. And we are into the dog days of summer here as the baseball season has taken a really unexpected, fabulous turn for the Blue Jays. And almost first place in the entire league. Brewers just ahead. But that's been great. Crops are looking good. The heat is definitely hot out in Eastern Canada. There's some concerns about some of this tassel wrap, some of the issues in the U.S. corn crop. That's going to be really interesting to see when the Pro Farmer Crop Tour gets to the Midwest in a couple weeks here into August, and see kind of what some of the yield expectations are. So far, we have, as we heard earlier this week, very much, Jim was talking about this, very much on the optimum yield curve from a corn perspective. Out in Western Canada, as I've been saying here on the show, that crop's definitely looking a lot better than it did, say, a month ago. And I think people are feeling a little bit better about some of their yield expectations. We heard that yesterday, really across the board from the Western Canadian farmers, as we have been seeing some rain in certain parts. So, okay, let's take a break. We got the panel lined up. We got Andrew Campbell, Tyler McCann, Marvin Slingerland, and we're going to break down the biggest issues of the week, see what's impacting the sector, and what are some of the things that they want to see going forward. I think we're going to, no doubt, we're going to get into getting a better understanding about where Canada needs to go from here, is that August 1st deadline fast approaches between Canada and the U.S. trade negotiations, and we'll talk about that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, of course. Back right after this. We're joined here by Ron Kluskins. He's AGI's dryer business development rep. At what point does it make sense for me to have my own dryer?
It's a pretty simple answer is most guys can benefit from a dryer because they put their future and their own economics in their own hands. Even a small operator with a couple hundred acres can benefit from an in-bin storage dryer. Yeah. And when guys get to 300 or 400 acres, going to a continuous flow dryer, the economics is very good. They essentially dry for half of what an elevator would charge them.
Is it like a case of matching combine capacity, storage capacity, like before you decide on which dryer to purchase, or how does that work?
In a lot of cases, producers already have some storage bins on the farm, so it's just trying to incorporate a dryer to match the size of your operation, match your combine capacity, and then having some good assistance and good information from dealers.
Make sure you go to aggrowth.com to find out more.
At Proven Seed, we know that farming in Western Canada doesn't just teach us, it shapes us. Here we face challenges with resilience, innovation, and grit born from decades of experience. We battle the conditions again and again because growing crops here isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We're raised to adapt just like you, with varieties grown specifically for your local conditions. Visit provenseed.ca/raised to adapt to hear our story.
Let's get to the RealAg Issues panel here on this Friday. Up first, we've got Marvin Slingerland. He is the Senior VP of Agriculture with MNP, based out of Lethbridge, Alberta. Hey, Marvin, how are we doing?
Pretty good, Shaun, and glad to be back here.
Yeah. How are things? How are the crops? What are you hearing from clients? How are the crops looking around that Lethbridge area?
I don't know if you drive around, Shaun, they're looking pretty good, especially the corn crops. They look amazing this year. And even if you look at the old saying of knee high by July 4th, like most people it was like 6 feet tall already in early July. So yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful weather.
Yeah. Some of the dryland folks in Southern Alberta, we had Preston Jorgensen on the show yesterday, who's out in Oyen, and he was saying that he was talking about in total, like around 6 inches of rain, which, where Andrew is not a big deal, but in Oyen, that's a lot of rain. And
yes.
We're looking a lot better than 30 days ago. So that is very good to see. Also joining us is Andrew Campbell, based out of Strathroy, Ontario. He is a dairy farmer and CEO of Fresh Air Media. How are we doing today, Andrew?
I'm doing great, Shaun. It is warm in Southern Ontario today, to say the least, but the corn is thrilled. Got a shower last night. Now it feels like a rainforest. It is taking off. So,
just is it the temperature or is it the humidity that you're facing?
All of it. It feels like an all of it kind of day. Yeah. Just that we had a thunderstorm roll through. It was warm yesterday, but you get those thunderstorms that just brings in like that mass of kind of humidity. And the crops actually, because it's been raining enough the last couple of weeks, the crops really are very appreciative of both so far. So
yeah, got to keep those cows cool though. In this kind of heat,
the cows are less thrilled. The cows are definitely less thrilled. They do fine if it cools down at night, which it did not last night. So as long as it cools down, in the next couple of days at night, they'll be okay. Once you get 3 or 4 days where you get hot days and hot nights, then definitely the cows don't appreciate the weather as much. But fans are rolling, lights are off, it's shaded. They're at least comfortable today so far.
Nice. Also joining us is Tyler McCann, Managing Director at CAPI. How are we doing today, Tyler?
I'm doing well, Shaun. Great to be with you. No sweaters today in Western Quebec either. It's awful warm here.
Yeah. Do you enjoy the heat? Because listen.
No, I'm with Lindsay. I want
people.
Give me cool kind of sweater weather. I mean, I would much rather have to put a sweater on to go outside than kind of sweat through just kind of standing out there. And it is humid.
You're Nordic in nature as well.
I am. Yeah, life's better.
Marvin and I think are more on team like it hot. Is that correct, Marvin?
I love the hot summer nights. I do not do well with humidity, Andrew, but I love the dry heat here in Southern Alberta.
Absolutely. Nice stuff. Good stuff. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show today, before you guys came on, a lot of things happening here in the middle of the growing season. One of the best things is the fact the Blue Jays are in first place. Not just the first place in the American League East. They're like first place in, now they got the same amount of wins as the Astros and the Brewers, but I think the Brewers have a little bit better of a winning percentage. So things are going well this summer, Andrew. I think this is it's pretty fun to watch that. Have you seen the drone shots over top of Rogers on the TV?
No, I haven't. You know what? We were actually talking about that last night because I took the kids into Toronto the other day and just ahead of when they beat the Yankees there on Wednesday night, and we were saying, certain times of year is about now when I start investing in ball, because there's not quite as much, nighttime field work. There's a little bit of time. I can throw it on the office, all of that. So now I feel like, some years it's been tough to invest in that, end of July, early August season. But this is like jumping on the bandwagon now. Time to watch the games and promote the fact I'm a Blue Jays fan.
It might even turn McCann into a baseball fan.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I still don't understand why Canada's got a baseball team, but
what? What is wrong with you?
Yeah, we got other priorities.
You're locked in on other stuff. Well, let's get to it here. I find it interesting. Prime Minister Carney had put in place a July 21st deadline to have some sort of a deal with the U.S. And we've blown through that. And I don't know if that's really a big surprise, but August 1st is the next deadline that Canada is dealing with. And it kind of seems, Tyler, that both Mexico and Canada had a little bit of a different approaches leading to this point. I would say Canada's morphed a little bit more into the Mexican strategy, but they both ended up at the same spot. It doesn't seem to be a priority for the U.S. to have some sort of framework, agreement, a deal, whatever that is.
Yeah, and I think if what we see from the UK and Japan as kind of these examples of early deals is possible outcomes, then I think it's in Canada's interest to delay this as long as possible. Like, I really don't understand why we're celebrating these agreements that Japan and the UK have reached as good things. These are going to make trade between the two countries more difficult. For a U.S. government that seems to want to lean on its kind of free market and libertarian space, they are getting into really managed trade between the two countries, and I don't think that that's in Canada's long-term interest with the United States. And so the more that we can do to get to a trade deal that protects duty-free trade back and forth and leaves it as open as possible between the two countries, the two economies, the better. And again, I think Canada and Mexico are on the same page. There's talk, right, that Canada and Mexico are going to enter into their own agreement to try and facilitate trade between the two countries around the United States, which is also really positive. But I don't think we've seen any evidence of there being any benefit to reaching a deal early on with the United States. And I think the more that Canada can do to, never mind August 1st, if we can get to January 1st without a deal, I think that that's probably in our interest.
Marvin, what are you hearing from partners at MMP as they talk to their clients, when you're face-to-face with agricultural farmer and ranchers across the country? What are you hearing from them on this topic?
Yeah, to be honest, Shaun, if you go back to January, February, when this is flaring up, a lot of people are nervous. And I think people right now are at the point where we'll take it when it comes. And there's been so much flip-flopping back and forth where people have almost, in my opinion, have tuned out. And when a trade deal happens, it'll happen, and we're not going to worry about it until then. There's been so much unknowns right now, and people have sort of moved on, in my opinion, and we'll take it when it comes.
I think Marvin, honestly, I've had the same experience. If I think talking to manufacturing clients back in January, February, much different conversation than, say, at Ag in Motion last week.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very different. Andrew, one of the takeaways that I think, and Jim Wiesmeyer and I were talking about this on Wednesday's show, is one of the tells, I think, for Canada related to dairy in that Japan deal that the U.S. just has somewhat, whatever that agreement looks like. On rice, Japan did not increase the tariff, the TRQ amount. They just changed the allocation of how much of those purchases would come from the U.S. on that 770,000 metric tons. I right away thought of the dairy situation, which, again, the ask from U.S. dairy groups is not to expand market access further. It is not to say supply management go away. It's changed the definition of those TRQs to how we see it from an American perspective. I think I view that deal as a bit of a positive tell for the Canadian dairy industry.
Well, I think it is one where, at this point, if that is the ask and the only ask, certainly the industry wouldn't be a real big fan of it, given that was, what was agreed to a few years ago and is working on our side. Is that going to be the sticking point for the Canadian government? Of course it's not. I think that it is one of those things that the Canadian government will end up, kind of going along with that if that's what it takes to get a deal. I just, from everything you see and all these conversations and the way, new tariffs are coming in and all of that, like it is so far down the list for these negotiations that I think if we get to that point and that is the thing that says, okay, fine, we'll do that and it'll be done. We'll see the Canadian government doing it. I just think they have so many other issues that they are working through that it doesn't even hit the radar.
Well, what I said on AgriTalk earlier today was that if you look at it, it's agriculture fits into some of the text, but it's kind of ancillary. It's kind of on the periphery. It's really about autos, planes, and energy. And so I don't see the issues with Canada and Mexico being, obviously they throw in the fentanyl and stuff like that. President Sheinbaum talked about how fentanyl crossings are down 55, or seizures are down 55% at the southern border. But it really comes down to those three things across the board. And I guess they'll sort those out and agriculture will be. I think what a lot of people are worried about, though, is what the blanket tariff scenario. Having a blanket tariff, Tyler, 15 or 10% on top of non-compliant USMCA goods is different than having it a blanket tariff on USMCA compliant stuff.
Right, and there's a quote from President Trump today when he was out talking about this, where he effectively says Canada may just have to pay tariffs. That something about we haven't had a lot of luck negotiating with Canada. Yeah. Again, it's hard for me to understand how that's going to be any different than where Japan or the UK have ended up, where they're still paying tariffs too. So if you're going to have to pay tariffs anyways, I'm not sure what the benefit of the negotiations are kind of going through all of this other dance. I think that we do, especially in the ag context, need to do a better job appreciating the fact that USMCA compliant trade has been exempt of tariffs to date. And again, I think the big question in my mind is, when we're talking about Canada paying tariffs, are we talking about it outside of USMCA? Yep. And then we get through the renegotiation next year and what happens there, or will he actually take a more significant shot at the trade deal? But again, as long as USMCA continues to be exempt from the tariffs that he's talking about, like that's a major victory for Canada in the kind of this context of everyone else having to pay blanket tariffs that we're largely avoiding, recognizing that if you're in the auto or steel business in Canada or the copper business in Canada, your world's really different, and those industries are really at risk. And I do think that that's something, and the dairy industry in Canada does need to watch, right? Like I would be very curious how they would react to something that involves changing how TRQs are administered, because that is like a drop in the bucket compared to the impact that steel, auto, copper are going to face because of what Donald Trump is doing.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, want to talk about CDC Envy CWRS. It has impressive yields, early maturity, outstanding standability, and a robust disease package. With CDC Envy, your wheat crop will be honestly the talk of the town. Learn more at allianceseed.com, or you can call 877-279-2890. We've got Marvin Slingerland of MMP, Tyler McCann of CAPI, and Andrew Campbell of Fresh Air Media. And we've got more issues to break down here on the RealAg Issues panel, back right after this.
It is time for today's product spotlight. I've got Philip Korzak, Director of Sales, Western Canada for Vaterstad. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. How is Vaterstad and your team navigating that landscape?
We've seen some pretty significant shifts in buying habits across the board, not just Vaterstad. We're trying to essentially control what we can and not necessarily spend too much time worrying about things that are outside of our control. Supply chain, we have the ability to engage with our suppliers to be making sure that we're getting consistent consistent product, that the quality standards are still there. We're also engaging with additional suppliers so that if there are issues in the supply chain, that we're not just a single source for some of our components. Staying focused on our planning, having clear communication with not only our own internal staff, but out to our dealerships and our customers so that they understand where we are, what we're doing, and that we can continue to be a reliable partner to both our dealers and our customers. Stay tuned, and I think in 5 years or less, you'll see a lot of different things from us as well as from the industry in general.
At Alliance Seed, every seed starts the story of your success. With Alliance Seed varieties, you're not just planting seeds, you're planting the promise of a prosperous future. Our top-performing wheat, barley, oat, pea, and lentil varieties are tailored to meet the unique challenges of your farm, ensuring high yields, strong standability, and reliable disease resistance. Discover the Alliance difference at allianceseed.com or call 1-877-270-2890.
We're rolling here with the RealAg Issues panel here on this Friday as we get into the dog days of summer here at the back end of July. We're joined today by Andrew Campbell of Fresh Air Media, Tyler McCann of CAPI, and Marvin Slingerland of MNP. Well, earlier this week, Wednesday show, we chatted with the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Minister MacDonald, and I found it interesting. We talked about a lot of different topics. I encourage you to go back and listen to it. But one of the things that stuck out to me was the fact that 100 days in, and every time I talk to him, I always ask him, 100 days in here, Secretary Rollins and Minister MacDonald still have not talked. And I think a little bit of a tell here is I think that, and this is my opinion, I've not heard this, but I think that's some instruction from the PMO office that, hey, the trade talks between the U.S. and Canada are very centralized. And we're keeping this into a very small band, and we don't need other voices maybe potentially tripping some things up. Tyler, you're nodding. Fair?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to think that there's going to be strong coordination and consolidation of the kind of the levers of and the channels of negotiation in through PMO and through the work that Minister LeBlanc and Ambassador Hillman are doing. I think that's quite important. I'm not sure. Again, there's lots of other things that Minister MacDonald could talk with his counterpart about, and I'm surprised that there isn't more engagement there. I do think that given the dynamics around dairy, that is probably tougher than it used to be, and I think that's maybe more of a conflict point between the two of those, between the minister and the secretary, than it has been in the past. But at the end of the day, Minister MacDonald needs to be talking to his counterparts in the U.S. and around the world to really kind of meet this moment we're in of needing to rebuild relationships with the U.S., but also our other allies. And so,
yeah, we sent out a new edition of this Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index today for farmers to tell us, how current financials and future financial performance and how they're making it. One of the questions I asked was around what's your opinion on how the Carney government's doing here in the first 100 days? And I'm very interested to see what farmers think about that. Marvin, I guess what's your opinion? Do you think that there's a lot of talk about action? Are they moving fast enough on the action part, in your opinion?
I'm going to take a little different take on your opening statement there, Shaun. I think the first 100 days, they've really been focused on looking inwards in what we can fix in Canada and make agriculture better in Canada. And from what I've observed and in meetings with government, they've really been engaged and listening on and looking for priorities they can move forward fast in agriculture. And I get a real sense that this Carney government is committed to agriculture. The new minister is committed to changing things from the status quo and making it an opportunity. And I think he's been also vocal in cabinet to give agriculture a higher profile.
Interesting. Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's one where I would say from conversations that I've had, you had such hatred from the government, across the sector, across rural Canada in general, that seems to really have subsided completely. I'm not saying they're in favor and, go Team Carney, but it's almost like everybody now is kind of in this neutral, kind of this neutral gear now that says, okay, we'll give you at least a little bit of space to do this. And I think so much of that is impacted because of the conversations with the U.S. I mean, here in Southern Ontario, that is the only thing that people talk about, is because of just how impactful all of those sectors, particularly in auto, are for so many of the communities around here, that it's kind of one of those that, there's not really another option. There hasn't been anything even for him to blame him for yet. Everybody's still very much on the, this is a, kind of an American attacking Canadian side. So I think it's one where if they can actually make some advances, and that goes almost across the board on any sector, obviously agriculture being an important one, but it is one where everybody seems to be okay giving them that space. I think the challenge that they are going to run into, and I don't know when that trigger flips, is that if nothing gets done at some point, everybody will then, start to turn fast. I don't know how long that is, how long they have to do that, but for all the promises they're giving, at some point there better be delivery.
So how long is that runway, Tyler? What do you think?
Well, so I think it's not about how long's the runway. It is. Andrew said they have to do something. So what is the bar of things that they have to do? Arguably, and Marvin can probably have some thoughts on this. Last Friday, they announced some agri-stability changes. They finally got agreement with the provinces, or I guess they got agreement on Thursday. We missed it on the show on Friday because it took them 24 hours to put out a press release, which was a bit surprising. But it came out. They had agreement. Is that the bar? Is Andrew, like when you're saying they need to do something, can Minister MacDonald go across the country and say that's it? I don't think that's it. I think that there's an expectation for more, but how much more is I think the issue, because if it comes to September and we've got some big plan, that'll be okay. But if it comes to September and we've got not, I think that's different.
Okay, Marvin, in your opinion, what is an example of something that gets us above that bar and crosses the threshold and we're like, okay, we're making stuff happen here?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, Shaun, and I totally agree, Tyler. It is agri-stability. That's not like a earth-shattering announcement. Like, it's super good for industry and it's a very good announcement, but it is not what producers are looking for from this government. It's, in my opinion, Shaun, it's an open for business attitude in Canada where we can attract investment, keep capital in Canada, decrease regulations across the board, and make this as a country people want to do business with and people want to invest in Canada. And it's just a change in attitude where people actually just want to keep capital here instead of flowing it out to other jurisdictions.
And this competitive side of this, from whether it's regulatory or tax structures, that's a continuing challenge. Like one of the examples is with the tariff revenue in the U.S. If there is like a 10 to 15% blanket across the board on non-USMCA goods with all our other trading partners, you say 15%, you're roughly at about 75 to 80 people making $75,000 to $80,000. That's equal to what their federal income taxes are. So there would be or they're talking this week about on primary residences getting rid of capital gains taxes on the sale. That would be a big one, and it's much more affordable than getting rid of the federal income tax rate for people under the salary of $80,000. So Canada's going to have to continue, Marvin, to be creative here.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it's radical policies like where there's no capital gains ever in Canada if you sell to a fellow Canadian. If you sell your business, if I sell my business to you, Shaun, there's no capital gains and money stays in Canada.
Wow.
The problem is when you talk to Agriculture Canada, they say, well, we're not in control of finance and the Income Tax Act, but maybe the Department of Ag needs to talk more with Finance Canada and come up with ideas that actually will attract capital in agriculture. And
sorry, go ahead, Marvin. Sorry.
And just drive policy through income tax incentives.
And I think that there's a really interesting kind of example of this today where the Liberal platform said they're going to create a $200 million value-added investment fund. If I were them, I would go to Finance Canada and say, look, we'll give that back to you, but create an accelerated capital cost investment tax credit instead. Don't use Programming at Ag Canada to do it. Use the tax code and Finance Canada to do it. But I think the mindset at Agriculture Canada is we need to run our little programs, and it's better for us if we can run a program instead. But I think most people would agree, hopefully, that more competitive tax code would do far more than some program being run out of Agriculture Canada.
Yeah, Andrew, as an entrepreneur, I think you're not looking to relocate your dairy farm, but you want the tax structures, personal and corporate, to be competitive to other jurisdictions.
Well, and ultimately, all these programs, you can't chase these programs. Like, it's one of those things that, when I look at, investments that we make, you make the plan and then you go after to see if there's any programs that would benefit that. You don't tie it directly to that. The long-term strategy of your business does not fit with, oh, here's a new fund, so let's change our path to fit exactly with that. Like, it just doesn't happen in agriculture. It's one where if you actually put it into the tax code, then it creates more of that long-term structure. You can actually create strategies for your business that focus on where that tax code is, rather than a $200 million fund. Sounds great, but at the end of the day, that and particularly in some of that agriculture funding, it runs out fast. Maybe there's a 4-year window, but after 1 year it's filled up, or you have 1 day to file applications, and after that you're done. We did those programs, a few years ago, and we tried a couple of them. They all came back that said, oh no, we're too full, or no, you don't quite fit, or no, all of this. That said, like, it's not worth our time anymore. If it's in the tax code, then actually we might change the strategy.
Great. Go ahead, Marvin.
Very good point, Andrew. And a lot of these little programs that come out in ag, they're not big enough to actually change the industry in Canada. Like a $5,000 subsidy to buy a new piece of equipment is not what producers are looking for, or what industry needs as a whole. And somebody actually used the analogy of, these are kayaks, and industry is actually looking like for an oil tanker.
Right.
Like we need to have big change coming.
Bolder. Canada needs to be bolder. Yeah.
But government can't afford to do that investment on its own, right? So how does government get out of the way and let companies attract investment? One of the interesting stats that's changed over the last couple of years is Canada still has got higher foreign and direct investment in Canada than Canada has outside, but not in Canada-U.S. That's changed. We now invest more in the U.S. than they invest in us. It's actually basically European investment in Canada. That's kind of been our saving grace. But the fact that Canadian firms are investing more in the U.S. than U.S. firms are investing in Canada says a lot to me. And that should be kind of the low-hanging fruit. Again, how do we keep more of that Canadian money in Canada at the end of the day?
We've got more of the RealAg Issues panel coming up right after this quick break. Now time for a product spotlight with FP Genetics. Sales Manager Chad Yachinsky. What agronomic support and solutions can FP Genetics offer growers who are considering hybrid fall rye today?
We've got a very experienced team, got over a decade of experience in working with rye in general. Very well-established team that can talk about rye front to back. Calling the territory managers, we got one in every province. We just actually hired 2 brand new product specialists. We'll have a Western and Eastern product specialist that's really tailored towards working with that grower, that retail, the independent agronomist, and providing that next level support that sometimes I think we're missing in the cereal world. Just working with growers to understand the agronomics of it. I know there's a lot of new growers to rye, so it's just how can we continue to educate them. We came up with a production manual last year. Pretty much answers 95% of the questions that have come our way on rye. So anybody that's even considering it, reach out to us. We can get you a physical copy, a digital copy of that production manual. fpgenetics.ca, hybridrye.ca, which is strictly hybrid fall rye, or reach out to all the territory managers and our information's on there.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. One of the things that Canada could negotiate with the U.S. is maybe, can we just win a Stanley Cup once in 10? Like, could we make that happen? If we can orchestrate a draft with cold envelopes, surely we can somehow figure out to get the Stanley Cup. You know what? The World Series, Andrew, bringing the World Series trophy to Canada again, that would be a nice compromise.
I would bet that would not be as negotiable on the U.S. side. I think if we took that, it's like them taking the Stanley Cup from us. If we take that World Series trophy, like, it would have to be basically like, okay, you can have it back, but we need to reduce these steel tariffs. Maybe that's the way we can start negotiating here.
Yeah, well put.
So, Shaun, here's my kind of sports reference comes again. I think there's this tax issue, right? If we want to be more competitive in the Stanley Cup playoffs, we need to make it easier for big hockey stars to come and live in Canada, to make them want to live in Canada, right? So, same issue. We want to fix agriculture. We want to win a Stanley Cup. We need to fix the tax code.
Yeah, the way the NHL has talked about how the different tax rates in the States and between the two countries, how that isn't sort of a factor in the success that Florida teams have had as of late. That's a bizarre sort of reaction, and it does. I think it does make very much a difference. Hey, Tyler, this Let's Grow Canada letter. This was 30 different groups coming up with 4 kind of key priorities, basically saying let's make Canadian agriculture a priority. Minister MacDonald talked about it on Wednesday. He was like 2 thumbs up on the letter. He supports all the things that were said. He thanked those organizations for stepping up and communicating that to the PM. What's your thoughts?
Well, A for effort, right? We need farm groups in Canada to work more closely together. So I am strongly in favor of any effort to do that. I often say that when you're sitting in PMO or in the finance department, you think about agriculture as a unit. You don't think about pork versus canola versus dairy. And so we need to do better kind of meeting them on their terms. But I don't know, Shaun. I mean, I think we're in a moment where back in the old days, agriculture groups could go to government and say, come up with a plan for us and we'll support you with it. The fact that now they're still saying, we want you, the Prime Minister and the government, to create a focused plan for economic growth. How come they did not go to government and say, here's our plan, here's what we want you to do specifically, and here's what we, as the private sector, as farmers, as businesses, are willing to do as well? I think it's a missed opportunity. And I know from those that were involved, hard to get agreement, 30 different groups, 30 different perspectives, but we as agriculture need to get out of the habit of saying, government, come up with a plan for us, and we need to go to government instead and say, here's our plan. Here's what we want you to do as part of it.
There were some omissions, some of the groups that didn't participate. NFU is not on the list. Pulse Canada not on the list. I think there's a few others, which, I don't know if that's a big deal or not, but definitely not everybody on the same page.
But mostly everybody. I mean, we can focus on the differences and who's not there, but I think what matters is we've got a diverse group of ag stakeholders coming together. I think the bigger issue is, to be honest, a lack of ambition in the list. If all that those groups can agree on is that agriculture is special and government should treat us as special, we need regulations that support a growth agenda. We should have better transportation infrastructure, and we need modernized risk management tools. And again, Marvin, if you can explain what modernized risk management tools actually mean at the end of the day, I think that would be helpful. But I mean, this is low-hanging fruit, Shaun, that these groups have agreed to.
Marvin, what does modernized BRM look like?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on that, Shaun. It's like, I would say it's just more responsive risk management, but I'm not a proponent of doing a big scale change on risk management. I think the current programs are actually pretty good. It just needs little tweaks and maybe some subsector enhancements to make it work for all sectors. But for the rest, the programs are actually working pretty good. And I think it would be a disaster to flip it upside down and create something new at this point.
But Marvin, do you think there's a chance that there's the 2025 changes that they agreed to, the cap from 3 to 6 million and 80 to 90%? What do you think? Could we see those change? Do you think those changes could roll into 26? I asked the minister about that, and I didn't get a real firm position on it. What are your thoughts?
I'm hopeful it would roll into 26. If we look at British Columbia, they announced a $6 million cap last year already. It's nice to see all the provinces sign up now. 6 million is, in my opinion, is still not enough for where the size of farms and investment have gone. I'd be looking at having that 6 million indexed to inflation, and it's an annual increase instead of waiting 20 years to adjust it.
Andrew, what's your opinion of that Let's Grow Canada letter? There's a lot of different groups there, from turkey farmers to cattle producers and everywhere in between. Not these groups do not agree on everything, but they agree on what's in that letter. What are your thoughts?
Well, I kind of am going to, go a little more optimistic than Tyler, because I would actually agree with a lot of what he says. I'm really hoping, and I don't know where this goes from here. I'm really hoping this is step one. That these groups, they sat down, they agreed to, here's the structure, we want to do that. Now what are they doing? Because I absolutely agree with him on this, is that it actually has to have action to it, because, something that just says prioritize, transportation, trade infrastructure. All we've left is that now the government can decide what the trade and transportation infrastructure is. And they can come to the table and they can make a big announcement and say, we did exactly what you wanted. And all of these 30 groups will say, well, no, we didn't mean that, but we never told them. So it's one of those where we're almost setting ourselves up to, kind of give the government a win that we're not going to necessarily like. So what I really would hope for all of these groups is I love the fact that there are so many groups listed here, and they are on the same page, as you said, Shaun, in areas that we do not agree all the time on. There are groups here, that co-signed this letter that I love the fact that they're together on this. But we really need to take this another step forward, and I hope those conversations have already begun in terms of, okay, now here are those 4 things. Out of those, what are the 2 things that we are actually going? And take a page out of the government's book. This is what they're doing to prioritize all their infrastructure investment between what the provinces want and what the federal government wants and all of this. This is their strategy. Why don't we in agriculture take that too? Everybody lines up what their priorities are, try to come to a table, and then we deliver something to the government that they cannot say no to.
Well, what we don't want is this to become like Barton Report 2.0, where you go to a meeting for the next 5 years and everybody just brings up this report or this letter, references it, and we're still talking about the we need to take action thing in like 4 to 5 years. That we can't fall into that trap.
No, when is that meeting scheduled? I want to know when the meeting to advance this is actually scheduled. Is it on the docket? Is it happening the second week of September? Perfect. Let's get it on the books and let's actually get some action from this.
Don't hold your breath, Andrew.
Oh, I'm going to be optimistic. This is the day we're going to get change. I can feel it.
Yeah, but to your point earlier, whenever the government comes and says we've modernized BRM and we cut Agri-Invest as part of that, I'm curious as to how all of those groups react.
But they've given them the window to do that. They're now allowing the government to do that, unfortunately.
Yeah. One of the things that could be coming, big cuts at AFC. We'll talk about that. And is there anything to take away from USDA's announced cuts this week? We'll talk about it all on the RealAg Issues panel, back right after this. Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
Soil health is under pressure, but real solutions start below the surface. Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure Humulite. Formulated for performance, backed by consistency, trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth Humulite. Learn more from Mine to Market at blackearth.com.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio and the RealAg Issues panel. Andrew Campbell of Fresh Air Media, Tyler McCann of CAPI, and Marvin Slingerland with MNP. Tyler, big cuts announced this week at USDA. We'll have to see what the implementation of them looks like, but moving people out of D.C. into, I think, 5 satellite places across the country, and big budget cuts. And we knew this was coming, but we finally got some details. What were your thoughts when you read some of the deets?
So I was actually surprised that the reduction in workforce, which I think they're saying now is 4,500 people, actually wasn't bigger. But it turns out that's because 15,000 people have already voluntarily left USDA, I think that is like really quite speaks to the culture that exists inside the government in the United States today. And as much as people have this image of these people that are all kind of bureaucrats sitting in offices in DC, that's not who these people are, right? Like, I mean, that may be some of them, but the most of USDA's workforce are researchers and scientists and economists and people working in Farm Service Agency offices across the country. And you've always got to kind of be careful what you wish for when you talk about relocation and budget cuts, because all of a sudden it may soon hit close to home. The idea of having people working outside of DC or any capital is always, I think, a good one. There's like, especially in the world that we're in today, moving people out into the country is positive. But you got to understand kind of actually what they're cutting and what that actually means for the services that farmers are getting.
And do they actually replace some of those people that do not transfer? I think that's another question that people are asking. Those 5 regional hubs are Raleigh, North Carolina, Kansas City, Indianapolis, Fort Collins, and Salt Lake are the 5 spots. Marvin, when I was talking to Minister MacDonald earlier this week, I asked about, does he need to have the proposed budget cuts at AFC? Does he have to have that to the Prime Minister before the budget? And he kind of said the overarching things seem to be kind of his paraphrasing his answer. I think we're going to hear about some cuts at the federal government as well here.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny, like you start picking up on the same language from all these different departments where this is a different government. We're doing things differently. There will be changes. And I think we're going to see cuts across public service in Canada as well. And in my biased opinion, it'd be nice if there was more in CRA, because that's a bloated agency right now. But hopefully it doesn't impact critical sectors like CFIA and issues like that. So it's going to come, and we probably do need a cut as well here in Canada.
Andrew, what happens in this discussion is always, we need to have cuts. And everybody points over, like, cuts over there. And then when we get to cuts that impact us as a stakeholder, as an individual, we're like, I don't know, but that's not what I meant by the cuts. And so we're probably going to see that all this fall as the budget rolls out.
Oh, I would think so, because it is one of those things that when you start to look at, line items, I wouldn't necessarily think of AFC as one of those, as bloated as CRA is, and so it is one of those where, when you start making cuts that are significant enough to actually have an impact, it is, quite frankly, going to have an impact. So does that mean that all of a sudden a couple of research stations shut down? Does it mean that, some of the programming all of a sudden, slows down or moves to a different department? What do those cuts look like? And I think you're absolutely right, Shaun, when you talk about the fact that, everybody, particularly in our sector, would be very much in favor of the fact that, yep, we've got to tighten this ship up, but not in the thing that's going to impact me the most. And at the end of the day, I just don't think we're going to have that. So it goes back to, the conversation we had in the last break, is that if there are specific areas, we know these cuts are coming in this sector, how many people in the policy world are actually looking at that and say, okay, if I was cutting, these are the areas that we think would have the least impact on the sector, on the industry. It cannot be something like CFIA. We need those inspectors in plants so that all of these products can continue to export. We need it in, certain other sectors. Do not touch that. Touch here instead. Then maybe, all of a sudden we can have a say. And I think government would actually listen. I think Minister MacDonald would actually listen to input like that. Are those conversations happening? I don't know, but I think as an industry, we need to start to take that initiative.
Yeah, I think there's big questions, Tyler, on, where do we go with research going forward? And some of these research stations that are scattered across the country. What about funding of public plant breeding? What does that look like in the next budget potentially? I think there's a lot of questions. Those are just a few examples, but there's a lot more.
And again, to Andrew's point, I think CAPI is the only organization in agriculture that I'm aware of that has spoken about cuts. We put out a report in February about the potential for fiscal restraint, trying to get ahead of this, laid out kind of what we thought was the approach government should take. Not only are others not talking about cuts, if you go back to that letter that we talked about before the break, it talks about new investments. Like, not only are they not saying, here's where we think you should prioritize the existing spending, there's still this impression out there that there's new money that's available. But the reality is, like, the department's budget, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's budget is $4.5 billion, give or take. That's about 40% more than it was in 2015 whenever I left the department. There is money in there that can be cut. And I think that kind of, we get really fixated on things like research stations, but the big dollars and cents is not in that. It is in things like crop insurance subsidies. It is in things like today, supply management compensation represents a fairly significant chunk of that money. I mean, that's the SM compensation sunsetting. It's kind of going away on its own, but there's big dollars and cents. Things like the off-calf program, I would expect it will sunset and go away. I don't know. I think Agri-Invest's days are numbered. But again, that's the type of thing where, in my mind, that's low-hanging fruit from the BRM side, just to cut that program. But I don't think you'll see any kind of farm group come anywhere near close to saying that out loud.
Marvin, I agree with Tyler here. If you let's take that Let's Grow Canada letter that all those groups signed. And okay, what does part 2 of that look like? And I think it needs to lead with, okay, considering you need to cut budget by 10 or 15% or whatever that number is, here's where we see the opportunity. And maybe there's a reallocation of dollars. So it's not just all about cuts, but it's about, hey, we could maybe reduce this and invest there. But that's getting us details that you'll never get those 30 groups to agree to.
No, and it would be a really good exercise to go through that list, and on those 4 points, just go and give like 2 or 3 highlights where, like, these are the critical things that you could hit and change. And government does not mind getting answers. And Andrew, you mentioned that too. Like, let's just give a solution that everybody agrees on, and you'd probably see things move faster than just broad statements on a vague concept.
Yeah. It just, again, it is not easy, but we have to do the tough work. Like, we can say it's complicated. Well, of course it's complicated, but we got to pierce through that. Andrew, go ahead.
Well, I think it's one of those that, if you do talk about this, 2.0 version, it is a case of, we talked about, all the things that, the kind of the wish list that each of those groups would have and parse down. Well, actually, what if each group then also had to have if you were to cut 2 things, you have to make this decision as well. Where are the 2 areas you would cut to find these savings? Could you actually, come up with a solution there as well? I think it is one of those that too often we say, well, that'll be a tough conversation, so let's hold this group together. Well, if everybody in this group actually is invested and actually wants what's best for the industry, what's best for the industry is we make our own decisions, and we come to the government with those decisions. So it's a case of, if that's what we actually want, you're right, we need to sit down and do the hard work.
Yeah. Hey, Tyler, we got a webinar coming up next week.
Yeah, talking about FPT relations, and a big part of the money that Ag Canada spends is tied up in that FPT agreement. If we actually want to get ambitious policy change, the federal government can't do it on its own. It has to bring the provinces along with it. But boy, the framework that we've got is about 25 years old, and it really hasn't changed in that point in time. And if we want to talk about doing things differently, the provinces need to be at the table, and the best way to do it is through that Fed-Prov agreement. So we want to dive into that. Again, something that we should be talking about more in agriculture than we do. Just like budget cuts, I don't know, it's too complicated. People don't want to go there, but we need to find ways to get the provinces and the feds working closer together.
Yeah, register for that webinar by going to CAPI's website or RealAgriculture.com. The more the merrier, and add to the discussion. We got a great lineup of guests and panelists, and looking forward to that next week. Okay, guys, we're out of time. This went very, very fast. We're going to have a bonus round for sure on the things we didn't get to, but here on Rural Radio 147, I want to say, hey, Marvin, have yourself a great weekend.
Thank you, Shaun. You as well.
There's Marvin Slingerland. He is Senior VP of Agriculture at MMP, who obviously does work across the country when it comes to accounting and a whole lot more agronomy now as well. Also joining us is Andrew Campbell, Fresh Air Media. Andrew, have yourself a great weekend.
Hey, you too, Shaun. Thanks.
And Mr. McCann, great to have you here.
Great to be with you. Look forward to talking to you on the webinar on Wednesday.
Absolutely. Okay, if you have any feedback, send us an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Those of you listening to the podcast, stay tuned for the bonus round. And everybody on Rural Radio 147, thanks so much for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Cheers, everybody. And welcome to the bonus. Here we are, where we sometimes joke that this is where things go off the rails sometimes a little bit, usually caused by Tyler McCann. So I just warn you, Andrew and Marvin, that this is where Tyler tends to get a little bit spicy or tries to rile me up a little bit. So be careful.
Well, we don't have Kelvin here to throw a wrench into things, Shaun. So I think it'll be a better conversation today. I always blame him.
Yeah, you didn't get, well, but if everybody was such a big Carney supporter like Kelvin,
yeah,
you didn't get any of those.
Yeah, and it's hard to know, kind of, Kelvin's so political and partisan, but it seems to depend which side of the bed he gets out of in the mornings, which side he's cheering for.
Well, as somebody that does this show on a daily basis, when you're not on it and you listen to it, you find, I could just imagine Kelvin right now arguing with his radio in his truck and saying, "Darn you, McCann! Darn you!" Anyway, okay, Tyler, what did we not get to today?
There are 30 employers in Quebec that are suing the federal government for access to the temporary foreign worker program. The temporary foreign worker or immigration was kind of big on the theme of the premier's meeting this week in the Muskokas. I think in agriculture this has always been kind of top of mind, but we went through this last election where there was this broad agreement on cracking down on immigration, on rebalancing immigration, but kind of building on a theme that we talked about earlier. All of a sudden, that means businesses aren't getting access to the employers that they need. So we want everybody else to cut down on their immigration, not us cut down on our own. And we're starting to see that really kind of take on this new light with, again, employers suing the federal government to try and get access to temporary foreign workers.
Marvin, you deal with a lot of different client types across the sector in Canada. Access to labor, I don't care which segment you're talking to, they're bringing it up.
Yeah, it's a big issue in agriculture, and it will continue to be a big issue. And I think it goes back to like who needs to be in charge of that decision on immigration. And sure, we probably had too much immigration come into Canada, but like a broad cut impacts sectors like ag when programs like the temporary foreign worker program get caught in this, and we have like 7-8 months delay on people coming in where we actually need these people in Canada to work, and it's an issue in the United States too. Like even now with the deportation and stuff, like it hurts agriculture, and is trying to connect that dot with government and industry on what sectors actually need it and what's a legit program. Yeah,
absolutely. And Andrew, you put in robots, so you don't have to worry about this anymore.
Oh, basically that's, wow. It is one of those that, within the dairy sector, it has been amazing what the evolution of the use of temporary foreign workers has been. Not just in dairy, but I think in livestock in general is, that there were a few that, started, found tremendous success with it. Partly because, some of these folks that are coming from these other countries have lots of livestock experience too. This is not just a horticulture thing, and do really well, in it. And I think it is one of those that no matter, where you are in the country, and almost to the point of it doesn't matter the size. I was talking to somebody else. They have one employee and it is a temporary foreign worker, because they struggled so much. So it is a case of, doesn't really matter the size, doesn't matter, you need that access to labor. And in today's world, in, the rural parts of the country we're talking about, this is a key for, especially for livestock today.
It was interesting. Yesterday, I was in my first Waymo. Okay. And that is a self-driving Uber, essentially. And my wife and my daughter, and all three of us first time, kind of it was a cool experience in the sense that, well, one, there's no driver and we're driving through Scottsdale, or riding through Scottsdale as this car is, self-driving itself. And they were kind of freaking out. It was like we're on a roller coaster. it was fun to watch the decision making of the car as traffic challenges presented itself. And I had said to my wife and daughter that this is such a, this is our first time in a self-driving car. This is a very unique experience. But just thinking like 3 years, 5 years, this will just be like normal. And kind of probably like you just sort of think back relatively to history, like where when went from horse to motorized vehicle, and how that would have been such a like, oh my goodness, like the world is opening up. It was kind of that's how as I reflect on it, was we're in the car and I've watched, I took some videos and stuff like that. That's how I thought in the self-driving car. Have you ever been in one, Marvin?
No, never. It'd be I can't imagine what the experience is like, not being able to be in control or have somebody in control of decisions. But it'd be a weird experience the first time. You know what?
It was very uncomfortable for my wife because who's she going to backseat drive? The car is not listening to her, right? And so she was backseat driving the Waymo through me, and I was like, "What am I going to do with that information?" But we one of the things we had to cross a really busy, uncontrolled intersection, and watching it make the decisions was very fascinating. Flawless. We only had one aggressive lane change where you're like, whoa, what are we doing? Like, why would they change, then change back? Not sure what was going on there as we're, humming down the road. But overall, quite successful and just as cheap as an Uber.
Would you describe it as a assertive driver or passive driving?
Passive, I would say. Yeah. Good
More
defense
defensive.
Driving.
Yeah.
Not where it's like, whoa. You're never like that.
Yeah.
So it's just the possibilities. And we think about, talk about the labor situation and some of the shortages. We try to find farm workers and, just like those dairy robots that Andrew put in. Today's dairy robot is a lot more intuitive than, the first versions that came out. It really does give you an opening into your imagination in terms of what is all of this going to look like. And if you think about artificial intelligence and, ChatGPT came up with those agents this week, which is, I had a buddy that was showing me a demo. It's mind boggling. I can only imagine at an accounting firm how, how clients are using AI, Marvin, but also how the firm itself is. It's got to be fascinating.
Oh, it is. It's the next couple of years are going to be like a lot of change in a lot of professions, and it's super fascinating what the possibilities are.
Yeah. Andrew, what did we miss today?
Well, you know what? It actually is a good question in terms of the thing. We didn't necessarily not touch on it, but I want to go back to the thing that, the politics side of me, that talks about, where rural Canada is, and why now we're kind of neutral with Carney. What happens next for the Conservative Party? What lane do they pick? When they come back in the fall, when they come back in September, in which they build their relevance back up. Because I would say that over the last 100 days, their relevance has gone downhill very quickly. And they have not seemed to have a voice or have an opinion or have anything that, that those, particularly in rural Canada, can really stand behind. So what I really wonder about is where are they going to go, as they get ready for the fall sitting?
Marvin, what do you think?
My hope would be the Conservative Party actually just keeps moving things more on the right side business wise. And I think if we've seen like more of a center left or center policy shift here from the Carney government, I just hope the Conservatives keep pushing that along and just create a good business environment. And it might look more like a collaboration with the Liberals, which they likely don't want to do right now. But I think they're forced. Like, I think some of the language coming out of this government is more business friendly. And I think the Conservatives actually have to keep pushing it along. And it's maybe a very strategic move by Carney to do this, but
yeah, there's definitely been some platform theft.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And so as the Conservatives try to find a lane, that becomes difficult, right? You're having to really reconsider, and it can present some real traps for them.
Yeah,
trying to appeal to Canadians that they didn't appeal to in the last election.
Yeah,
it's and you think of this by-election is ridiculous. There's like they're trying to have like 200 names on the ballot. Kind of a circus. I don't know if we have McCann back, but Tyler, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Shaun. So my speaking of issues, we're got to fix that. But I think one of the things that people cite of is that I think the Conservative Party, again, real popular. Well,
good effort on our part. I don't think we got him. Marvin, what did we miss here this today on the show? What didn't we talk about that you think it's important to hit on?
Can't think of anything we didn't miss. I'd love to unpack what Tyler was talking about, like what's the future of AgriInvest, and that's probably a whole other segment on a different show. And I think it's that step back from industry is like what actually matters. Like, does AgriInvest matter to a producer in the grand scheme of thing? And can that money be actually reallocated to make another program better, or shifted into a different program altogether? And that'd be a fascinating discussion.
So what was the original intent of AgriInvest?
I think it was sort of a fix the hybrid from going from whether it was Fit Up or NISA, where it was like a very predictable program with a match in dollar amount. And I think it was maybe just set up as a transition for producers to understand going into the new agri-stability framework. But reality is that for most producers, the $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, like, is that the best use of your money? Like, could that be reallocated into a better program?
Getting rid of AgriInvest, is that, because I've heard it from a few people that's where one of the potential targets is that, who is that controversial to? Or is it controversial?
I think it would be controversial in the sense that people understand it's a predictable program, and I think it would upset, call it smaller producers maybe, who are not enrolled into the broader BRM programs. But maybe there's just a way to change it altogether. I think it's one of those topics that just needs to be floated out there and talked about, and industry just needs to discuss it and come to an agreement.
Yeah.
But
We'll bring it up next week at the webinar that we're doing with CAPI to sort of kind of read the room a little bit and see what the attendees are saying about that. Because I think I don't know if it's low hanging fruit. It just seems to be the one that's floated a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah.
Although I do wonder, I think the challenge we have is that, in the conversation, if this is the conversation, if this is what we're choosing, can we really call it a reallocation? Like, we're looking for cuts is the challenge. Is it really something that we can say, okay, instead move this money over here? Maybe, but if at the end of the day, if we're looking to say, okay, don't cut anything over here, this is that, pot that we'd rather you do, then I think, we as an industry have to find that line that says, no, you can actually cut this, you can take this away. And even if we don't support it, and this is, just kind of the farm politics at work, even if we don't necessarily support you doing that, we're not going to be critical. And I think, and I think as an industry, we could make a move like that we have to do it with something. There are maybe a couple others that, I'd be interested to look at too. But, at the end of the day, if AgriInvest is that low hanging fruit, then maybe that is the one.
Yeah.
It's not changing. I know it's not changing how we invest and reinvest in our business. No. That's for sure.
Okay. Well, we also got to make sure we just don't get, if we can't defend why we really need to have it, then really shows that it probably isn't the chopping block. Yeah. And there's probably going to be a number of things that the department is spending, the programming or areas of funding where it's like, yeah, we have been doing this, but, there's nobody really stepping up and saying, hey, this is like a must-have. If we don't have this, boy, here's the long string of consequences that the industry is going to have to face because of it. And so I think there's going to be a lot of those kinds of discussions right now.
And I do think the challenge with it is that, unfortunately, with a program like this, it does at the end of the day pick winners and losers. It is one of those things, as Marvin said. I would tend to agree that it's kind of leans more to some of those kind of smaller sized operations that may see that and utilize it and have an impact in that, and that's fine. But I think the challenge is no matter what risk management program it is, no matter what tax code changes, no matter which it is, at the end of the day, when we make those changes, it's going to pick winners and losers within the sector. And maybe that's just one of those conversations we have to have at first is which businesses, which size businesses, what are those businesses doing, that we want to really get behind and then evolve the programming based on that decision.
Yeah. Great stuff. Hey, guys, I really appreciate you joining us here today. Thanks so much for hanging on here for the bonus segment. McCann, I don't know what happened. He's got terrible internet. So thanks, Elon. Really appreciate it. And Andrew, have a great weekend.
Hey, you too. Thanks, guys.
All the best, Marvin.
You bet. See you, Shaun.
And again, everybody, S. Haney at RealAgriculture.com. Hopefully, Lindsay and Calvin had a great day off and enjoyed themselves. We had some fun here while they were away. And everybody have themselves a great weekend, and we'll chat again next week. Cheers.